Okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to do your bio. This is Mr. Dan Spears. He is the Vice President of the Industry Relations and Licenses at Broadcast Music Inc., BMI. In his capacity as Vice President, Mr. Spears works closely with BMI's licenses management team to create strategic value-driven sponsorships and customer events. He serves as a pivotal bridge between the company's licensing writer publishers, and business affairs team. In this role, Mr. Spears continues to develop new customer initiatives and strategic partnerships that feature BMI songwriter performances and help educate key accounts while providing new sources of venue for affiliates and licensees. You know what? This is a lot, and I'm very happy to have you here. And I want to say, I'm going to turn it over to Dan now. He has a PowerPoint presentation, and we will hear now from Mr. Dan on his presentation. Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Ian, for the opportunity to be with you all. And I appreciate, I know we're competing with a couple of other sessions, and so the few folks that are here, I hope that I cover the areas that you were anticipating that I would. If I don't, certainly feel free to ask the questions that are on your mind at the end of the presentation. I don't think we'll be taking any more than 30 minutes to go through this, and we'll have 15 minutes or so if you have any questions or issues that you want to raise that I did not cover. A little bit about myself. I've been with BMI for 32 years. My home office is Nashville, but for the last 32 years, I've lived here in Baltimore. So even though technically I report to Nashville, I've been working out of my home and traveling for the last 32 years. And so I was telling Steve earlier, I've been home every day for the last 7 months, and I've not had this kind of home time in years. Normally I'm on the road 75% of the time. So this has been a new world for me. And I've done a lot of these presentations virtually, and I'm getting the hang of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak from the perspective of both worlds. I know that there's probably musicians, songwriters, artists that are interested in how to protect their intellectual property. And then also I want to present a little bit from the perspective of the business venues that are the ones that pay the licensing fees, just to take it from their standpoint so you understand what their responsibilities are. And also in the event there are some venue owners and presenters, promoters that have an interest in this subject matter. Now, any music industry person worth their salt wouldn't dare start a presentation without music. And I'm not going to be the first guy not to do that.
Goodies but goodies.
All right, well, aside from wanting to kick this presentation off with something to get us all energized, there was a method to my madness here, and that is to demonstrate the fact that so many of our favorite songs that have been written were not written by the artists themselves, but by songwriters who are anonymous behind the scenes, writing some of the most prolific songs that have become the soundtracks of our lives, right? I mean, who knew that this song was not written by the Mamas and the Papas or by The Who or by Buck Owens, but it was Phil Medley and Burt Russell, two unknown guys that are BMI songwriters that wrote this song. It's been covered hundreds and hundreds of times by multiple artists. Yet these guys remain in the background, and they're the most important people to us at BMI because they're the ones that craft the songs. And at BMI, we have an expression that it all begins with the songs. And I thought that the best way to kick off this presentation was to speak about some of the rights that are really important to songwriters and artists as well, because your intellectual property is everything, and this is your revenue stream, and this is your livelihood. And as Steve, I think, referenced earlier on, there have been so many artists and songwriters that have had the unfortunate development in their lives of being robbed of those intellectual property rights. And so I thought it would be important to talk about them so that you know what your rights are and you know where your revenue streams can come from. So the mechanical right is the right that is owned by the publisher and the songwriter. The mechanical right kicks in with the sale of a CD. If any of you ever buy CDs these days, it kicked in years ago with vinyl. It kicks in now with digital downloads. Mechanical right means that any time a physical or digital product is sold, a song, the publisher and the songwriter are entitled to 9.1 cents per song, per sale, or digital download. And that right used to be really, really significant and represented an important revenue stream to the songwriter when people used to buy albums. So it used to be if you wrote a song that was on, and I'll use an example that's connected to this audience, on a Herbie Hancock album, right? If you wrote a song on there that never made it as a single, it wouldn't really matter because Herbie Hancock would sell, hundreds and thousands of albums. And so you'd split 9.1 cents per song on that album. And you could make a decent income off of that. Well, nobody buys albums anymore these days. So that right doesn't have the same significance today that it used to. So that's mechanical right. That's owned by the publisher and the songwriter. Now, brings up the question, what's a publisher? Well, the publisher is the entity that owns the copyright to a song. So the question would be, well, why doesn't the songwriter own the copyright? Well, sometimes the songwriter does. A songwriter can create their own publishing company that owns the copyright. But the way that the law is written is that all of these rights, the publisher and the songwriter, if it's the mechanical right, for example, split that right, that royalty 50-50. And why would a songwriter give up their copyright to a publisher? Because it's the publisher that normally is what brings life to the song. It's the publisher that gets the artist to record that song on their album. It's the publisher that potentially gets that song in a movie or a television show. So it is the publisher that almost serves as the agent on behalf of the song, that gets that song where it needs to be so there is a revenue stream that's available to the writer. So that's the mechanical right. I'm gonna switch past the master recording right and go to the synchronization right, because that's another right that's held by the publisher and the songwriter. And that is a negotiated right that kicks in when music is used in a television show, a commercial, a documentary film, a feature film. And that is negotiated between the copyright holder, which, as we talked about a minute ago, is the publisher. And it's negotiated between them and the music supervisor, or whoever is producing that commercial, film, video game. So the synchronization right covers the underlying words in music that are owned by the publisher. And that can be a pretty significant revenue stream, because so much music these days is used in television shows, in commercials. You hear it all the time. It's a great way to get your music out there, and it can be lucrative if your songs are placed in some high-profile commercials or television shows. Okay, we're going to go back to the master recording right. For those of you that are on this call that are not songwriters, but are more musicians, artists, the master recording right is something you need to pay attention to, because anytime, and I'll use the example of what I talked about with the synchronization right, but anytime music is used in a television show, a commercial, a video game, a feature film, that right, that master recording right, plays a role. And whoever is producing that film or that commercial needs to negotiate with the record label in clearing that right. And the master recording right, 50-50, is split between the artist and the label. So it's very similar to the synchronization right in terms of its split, right? The sync right is split between the publisher and the songwriter. The master recording right is connected to the sound recording, the original recording, so that those monies are split between the artist and the record label. So again, using film commercials as an example, let's say I'm using Fun, Fun, Fun by the Beach Boys in a commercial, a Ford commercial that I want to air on WBAL TV. Well, as the producer of that commercial, I need to negotiate the synchronization right with the publisher, so the underlying words and music are covered and the publisher and the songwriters get paid. And then if I'm using that original recording, Fun, 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 I got to go to the record label and negotiate the master recording right so that the artist and the label are fairly compensated. If there's not the original recording utilized, is some local group that's doing it, obviously you don't have to worry about that. The fourth right also connects to the artist and the record label. And this is the newest right within the copyright law that was enacted by Congress during the early stages of the digital millennium. It's called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and it was instituted in the early days of the digital revolution. And this protects the artist and the record label, because Congress was very concerned, and rightly so, that the digital copies that were being distributed and streamed are so pristine and such a high quality that theft was very easy to do, and people were doing it, as we all know, with the early days of digital. So the digital performance royalty kicks in anytime a song is streamed through one of the streaming services or is aired on Sirius or XM satellite. It doesn't kick in with commercial radio, only with streaming services and Sirius XM. Now, as a jazz musician or a jazz artist, for example, if you've got product out there, you've got music that's being streamed on some of the services, you need to make sure that you're properly affiliated with Sound Exchange, because Sound Exchange is the entity that represents the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, and you as an artist, they represent your rights, and they collect those royalties on your behalf from radio stations and streaming services for any digital performances. It's 50% of those royalties go to the label, 45% go to the artist and or band, and 5% go to any musicians that have performed on that recording. So let's say Steve has a great jazz album that comes out. He's a saxophonist, but he's the guy. It's the Steve Everett project. And I'm a bassist.
I'm a bassist.
A bassist. Pardon me. And I'm his side man. I'm playing the bass guitar, what have you. He would get 45% of those royalties collected, and I would get 5%. So those are four rights that I wanted you to tell you about that actually aren't even connected to the work that I do. The fifth right that I want to talk about is the one that's important to a lot of you folks that are songwriters that perform out or have your music played on commercial radio or in bars, restaurants, what have you. And that's called the public performance right. And the public performance right is defined really as any music that's played outside of a group that would be considered your normal circle of family and friends. So if it's music that's played at home amongst friends, that's not considered a public performance. If it's music that's part of a performance at a wedding, that is not considered a public performance. A public performance is when a song is performed at a bar or restaurant, in a hotel, streamed, broadcast, played in a yoga studio, a fitness center. Those are all considered public performances of music. And as a songwriter and the publisher as well, you are afforded royalties anytime that song is publicly performed. And so at the outset of your career as a songwriter, it's important to affiliate with an organization, which are referred to as performing rights organizations, that will represent that right on your behalf. BMI is one of those companies. I'll talk about the other companies in this space as well. BMI basically affiliates the songwriters and composers who create the work. As I told you before, it's the publishers that own the work. Sometimes a songwriter reaches a stage of their career where they don't need a publisher anymore, right? They don't need someone to bring life to their songs because they're so popular, they can make their songs, they can bring their songs to life without the help of another organization. So they don't go to a publisher. They own the copyright themselves, and they create their own publishing company. Bruce Springsteen would have his own publishing company. Billy Joel would have his own publishing company because they perform their own songs, and they get 100% of the royalties from the public performance. So this is what we call the circle of life at BMI, although this is more of a square. You affiliate with BMI. So here are some high profile songwriters that happen to be BMI writers. As I told you earlier, most of the writers we represent, you've never heard of. You know the songs, but you don't know the writers themselves. These happen to be pretty successful artists who happen to be songwriters as well. But they would join BMI. Their songs would then be broadcast on the radio or played at a restaurant or bar. We would track those performances. That's one of the major roles that a performing rights organization takes on, is to track that performance of that song. So you'd affiliate with BMI as a songwriter. You'd upload all of your songs, not the actual copies of the songs, but just the titles. And then we would be able to track those performances through whether they're streamed or broadcast on commercial radio or aired in a television show. That's a public performance, and that's our job, is to make sure you're paid.
Hey, Dan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, didn't mean to interrupt, but two things. One, we were talking about, or we were listening to the Beach Boys and some re-recorded stuff that was old. I wanted to ask you about the statute of limitation on doing stuff like that. Is it too early to ask that?
No. You mean statute of limitations on copyrights?
Yes.
Yeah, so copyright law is good for 70 years. Not the copyright law, the copyright, according to the copyright law, is good for 70 years after the death of the songwriter. So, for example, if I had a huge catalog of songs and something happened to me and I passed away this year, my family and my estate would have a piece of those royalties for 70 more years. So it's kind of an annuity. It's something that will be a part of the estate for a long, long time after the death of the writer. Okay. Then once it gets out into the public domain, then it's not licensable, and people can use that music without having to clear any of the rights that we just discussed.
That's what I think I was talking about, or asking about. After 70 years, people can use it without having any problems?
Correct.
Oh, wow. 70 years. Okay, the other question was, you guys, BMI, so these new ways of doing and recording business, when these new artists come out and they have their own studios and they're recording and they're selling their CDs out of the back of their trunks, or however, from what I understand, they can come to BMI and you guys will help them promote and produce?
Well, not promote and produce. We'll just, I would say, using another P word, protect. We make sure that if those artists, for example, that produce those CDs and sell them out of the back of their car, if someone actually takes that CD and starts playing it on a radio station, or takes it and downloads it to a streaming service, we make sure that those songwriters are paid for that public performance. That's what we do. We track performances, and then we pay licensing. We pay those licensing fees we collect from the businesses like restaurants, bars, and restaurants that sign agreements with BMI. We then in turn make royalty payments to the songwriters and publishers on a quarterly basis.
Man, you should have a halo on.
Well, here's the thing, Steve. BMI is a not-for-profit company. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's really our only job is to make sure songwriters get paid. And there are other organizations that do the same thing. This is a good segue. The first company that ever was created for that purpose is called ASCAP. You might have heard of it before. They're the oldest company doing performance rights representation in the industry. They were founded in 1914. They're a membership-based society. BMI was created in 1939 by the broadcasting industry because ASCAP was the only game in town. They had a very, very strong position in the marketplace. One could refer to it as a monopoly. And as a result, their fees increased by 100% annually. And BMI was created by the broadcasters who got tired of that and wanted to create a competitive music source. And so BMI was founded for those purposes. BMI was also created, and this is a little kind of fun history that many people don't know, and that is that during that time in the late 1930s, if you wanted to join ASCAP and have them represent your public performance rights, you had to have at least 2 established hits on the radio. Now understand, in the late 30s, what was being played on the radio was the traditional stuff, right? The George Gershwin, Stephen Foster music. And it was very difficult for these up and coming forms of music to get any kind of airplay, like hillbilly music, which is now referred to as country, or race music, which is now more commonly referred to as R&B and has progressed into hip hop and urban. Those forms of music could not find any platforms because radio stations were afraid to play it because there was no copyright compliance mechanism to compensate the songwriters and publishers, because ASCAP wouldn't represent those forms of music because they didn't have 2 established hits on the radio. So it was a catch-22. So when BMI was founded, they opened the doors to all forms of music. And that's why if you look at BMI's catalog, you'll see it's very rich in R&B, very rich in rock and roll, very rich in country. You know, the Muddy Waters of the world, the Chuck Berrys are all BMI songwriters. And they came on board because of that open door policy. BMI is also not-for-profit. CSAC is a third company. I mention it because they do have a decent sized repertoire, but we don't really know much about their operations because they are private and they are for profit and they are owned by a venture capital firm. There's a 4th performance rights organization called Global Music Rights. I mention all 4 of these primarily because sometimes my audience is full of venue owners and, you know, executives that run restaurant chains. And they want to know, well, when I play music in my establishment, do I need more than just one license agreement with a performance rights organization? And most of the time, the answer is yes, you really need all 4 if you're going to have a rich offering of music, because all of these entities represent a catalog of music that gets performed in venues. Now, BMI and ASCAP represent the lion's share. Between BMI and ASCAP, that's probably 93% of all music played on the radio today. CSAC is a few percentage points of that. Global Music Rights, a few percentage points. But Global Music Rights represents Bruno Mars and Bruce Springsteen. And so those are catalogs that's very difficult for you to not play. And the other thing is that songwriters collaborate with each other a lot. So if a BMI songwriter is collaborating with an ASCAP songwriter, then that venue would need an agreement with both organizations to publicly perform that music. So what is licensable? Where, if I'm speaking from a songwriter's perspective, and I'm getting money from entities that use my music, what entities would those be? Well, you know, your traditional radio stations. I mean, those, believe it or not, despite what you might hear, radio is not dead. It is not a dinosaur industry. It's still very, very important. Many people discover new music on radio. Yes, they listen to it a lot on Spotify, but they hear about it first on commercial radio in many cases. So radio still represents a very important revenue stream to any songwriter that wants to get an income from their music. Television, the same way. Any episodic music, for example. If you write jazz music and you're looking for opportunity to try and get your music placed somewhere, so all the episodic music you hear in all your favorite television shows, whether it's Law and Order or, you know, you name it, that music has to be written by somebody, and they're being compensated by BMI when that music is publicly performed, or ASCAP or the other performing rights organizations. Okay. Suddenly I've lost control of it, Steve. Did you do something? Did you move something? Did you like disable my
Oh, no, hold on a sec. Let me go back. No, I'm going to make you a co-host. How's that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think.
I mean, I still see.
Sorry, I might have messed something up, but it was with the best intentions. Sorry.
Okay. I just suddenly,
The account was a little bit screwed up, and it was going to cut the meeting off, so I had to change a setting, and that might have like screwed something up. But I think we're good now. So if Steve, if you make Dan a co-host,
okay, make Dan a okay. So Dan, have you lost control of your keyboard?
Yeah, it's not advancing now.
Okay, so I'm going to make him a co-host. Yes. I was getting messages that said that the meeting was going to end in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I had set it up as a pro account, but there was one more switch I had to flip that I didn't know about, so I just flipped it.
Okay, so
let me start all over again. Hold on.
Okay, so you got control?
Hold on a second. I'm going to start all over again.
Thank you.
I see your screen starting all over again, so you must.
No, I'm looking at someone else's screen. Hold on.
Oh, is someone else sharing screen?
Yeah, Michael Gourier.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to.
Here we go. Let's see.
Are you good?
Try that again. Sorry about this. I don't know what happened.
Ian, are you in?
I'm in, but I'm not a host, so
I still got Michael.
Michael, can you unshare?
I'm sure I've got Michael Gourier's screen here. It says.
Okay, so hold on a second.
I think he's in 2 meetings at once, like I am, and he might not be paying attention. But
no, I'm here.
Yeah. Can you stop sharing your screen?
Where do you find that at?
Here we go. Hold on. I think we might be okay.
Sure.
We might be okay now. Hold on.
I'm in the basic format.
All right, here we go. We're good. Anyways, going back to, so I was saying that television can be an important revenue stream.
No, Dan, I'm still seeing Michael's screen, not yours.
Oh, I can see it. I can see mine now. Maybe it's taking a while to kick in.
I guess I need to share my. Well, I'm sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties here, but
yeah, we need to make Michael. You should have an option to stop sharing.
I see a television. I think
you do. Okay, you do see a TV. Good. Then that's me. You don't see it. No one.
Well, here's the thing. Like I see a choice. I can choose which of your 2 screens I want to see. Okay, I guess I could just choose yours.
If Francine can see it, then I think the people that are tuned into this, which is only a few of us.
Renee Sweet wants your TV.
Okay.
I see the Zoom screen that says open Zoom meeting. Click open Zoom meetings.
Ian, as a host, what can I do?
You can try to force Michael's share off. Just click by his name and for the more and see if you can force it off.
Okay, now I see Dan's screen.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
and what
we're down to 1.
I see a clock with 2 musicians.
Yep, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We all here.
That's me. Okay, so I was just at this, when we stopped for a moment there, I was kind of taking everybody through those different industries, entities, venues that license music that ultimately pay the fees that in turn come back as royalties to the songwriters and publishers for the public performance. So we talked about radio, commercial television, bars, restaurants, jazz clubs. Those are all entities that when they have live music, they have to pay licensing fees to BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, that in turn becomes royalty payments to songwriters. DJs that are playing in bars and restaurants, it's not the DJ's responsibility to get a license, it's the entity that has the DJ there. So if it's a bar or a restaurant or a club, they're responsible for paying the licensing fees to the performing rights organizations. Same thing with karaoke. That's another thing that would require a bar, restaurant, music venue, hotel, what have you, to pay licensing fees for the rights to do that. Television, believe it or not, if they have the audio on television sets on in their business, that audio stream is the responsibility of the bar, restaurant, hotel, That's what the copyright law says. Any music that's played at halftime of a football game, for example, would be the responsibility of the bar or restaurant. Again, this is primarily for the benefit of businesses that use commercial music services. If you go into a bar or restaurant and you hear background music, and that's pretty much the only kind of music use that entity has, then you really, as a business owner, don't bear any responsibility for paying licensing fees to the performing rights organizations, because these companies pay on behalf of the businesses. So Mood Media comes to a bar or restaurant, Soundtrack Your Brand. These are all ambient music companies providing subscriptions to these businesses. They all come already licensed, so it's not the responsibility of the restaurant or bar owner. Now I'm frozen again, and I can't explain why. Let me.
Is this the purview of the Millennium Act?
The Digital Millennium Copyright Act?
Yes.
That was something we talked about a minute ago, and that's when the streaming services and XM Sirius, when any of them stream or play music, like these guys, Spotify, Pandora, yes, you're absolutely correct. The Sound Exchange administers that royalty distribution. So as a musician who appears on an album, or as the artist themselves, needs to properly affiliate with Sound Exchange to make sure that they're receiving those royalty payments. So yes, that is part of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, I'm flipping back to BMI as a songwriter organization. Understand, BMI represents songwriters, not the artists themselves. Sometimes it's one and the same. 90 cents of every dollar that a business pays BMI goes back to the songwriters and publishers to help continue to fuel the creative process. So BMI doesn't have to pay any dividends to investors or pay back a debt to a venture capital firm whom I have invested. The songwriters are really what we're all about, and that's true for ASCAP as well. They're 100% focused on collecting for the songwriters. I always put this slide in the last few months. I always have, just to kind of talk about some of the things that are going on right now that I think are kind of interesting and have put licensing issues on the front page of the newspapers, which is normally not the case. But with so many of the campaigns interested in using popular music in their campaign events, it's become a big issue. It used to be that a political campaign would get a blanket license agreement from BMI or ASCAP for the public performance of music at a campaign rally. But now so many of these high-profile artists are pushing back and saying, I don't want my music associated with that particular rally. So we have put clauses in our blanket agreements that allow songwriters to withdraw songs from certain contracts if they don't feel comfortable with their music being associated with a political candidate. And so you've seen a lot of that recently. The Rolling Stones and others have said, no, I don't want my music played at these certain political events. The other thing that's become very popular during the pandemic is virtual licenses for fitness industry and music venues who can't put people in their establishments. So they've tried to figure out ways to keep their doors open by doing virtual classes in the fitness industry and live streams from music venues without anybody there, but as a way to try and generate income by having cover charges to access a concert virtually, or perhaps using tip jars for artists and such. Drive-in concerts have become a big deal, right? I mean, never did we ever have big artists coming in and performing at a drive-in theater outdoors, but now that's become the norm because people can go in their cars and be socially distanced. Same with outdoor dining. A lot of music performances are taking place outdoors because of what we're going through right now. So the state of the music industry it's not great. I mean, touring is non-existent. Independent artists are struggling mightily. I don't have to tell you all that. You know that. Virtual concerts have been an option, but that only goes so far, right? I mean, you go out and you perform at your favorite venues. You did before the pandemic, and people felt an exclusivity of like, oh, I got one of 100 tickets that were available for this concert in Frederick, Maryland. He only comes once a year to perform here. Well, now you got to be careful as an artist to not oversaturate, and provide too many opportunities for your fans to see you perform, because then you're not getting the optimum return on your performances. The labels, the publishers are reporting mixed results during COVID. Streaming subscriptions are up for companies like Spotify and Pandora, but the ad revenue is down. So even though Spotify's active users are going up, their revenue is fallen. So it's a difficult time for everyone. I think this is a really important slide for those on the phone that perform a lot, or did perform a lot out in venues, and may not be aware of it. This is called BMI Live, and it's something that we instituted a few years ago, specifically for those small venue performances, because for years and years, BMI's royalty payments would be based upon commercial radio airplay, and then most recently digital streaming. But it never included those small bars and restaurants in downtown Baltimore or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, because we didn't have the technology, not yet anyways, to track those performances. And so we made up for that with an honor-based program that allows you as a performer, every time you perform at a meeting, at a venue, you have the opportunity to report those performances to BMI. You upload your set list of the original songs that you played. As long as that business or that restaurant, bar, or club has a BMI license, you will get paid for those performances. So once we get past the pandemic, make sure that if you're a BMI writer or an ASCAP writer, or CSAC for that matter, make sure that you sign up for this program or the similar program with the other organizations, because this, as a small independent artist, this is how you are getting compensated for those gigs that you're doing in those clubs that aren't big, huge concert halls that don't report their music use to BMI. You do it yourself. And I highly recommend that you affiliate with a performing rights organization if you haven't already, so that you can get paid for those performances.
Hey, Dan, just stepping again. So we're talking about musicians who have originals?
Yes.
Okay.
This is only originals. So for example, if I'm a jazz musician and I go out to a small club in Baltimore, and half the songs that I perform that night are covers, but the other half are original compositions, I report those original compositions and I get paid by BMI for those original compositions. And the point of that is that so many songwriters will say, well, why affiliate with BMI if my songs at this point have not become commercially viable? What's the point? Well, the point is that there are ways you can generate income without being on a radio station or on a Spotify. You can generate income by gigging at these small clubs and reporting your set lists to BMI. And guess what? Joining BMI is free. It doesn't cost a dime.
That was my next question. What's the cost? But you said you're a nonprofit.
Yeah, it doesn't cost anything to affiliate with BMI. There's no requirements other than you have to have, I know this sounds silly, but you have to have written songs, right? You don't have to have any big monstrous produced songs. You just have to be a songwriter. So we have a ton of songwriters who represent whose music has never been publicly performed and maybe never will, but that's okay. We have this open door policy, we always have, that we welcome all songwriters, and regardless of the genre, regardless of what kind of a track record you have, we're there to make sure writers are fairly compensated.
Now,
Excuse me.
Yes.
One other question. One question. Does the music have to be written?
As opposed to?
Video, tape, CD.
Well, as long as the song, I mean, it's a written song, and we don't need to see how it's been recorded or where it's been recorded. If you've written a song, there's two things you should do when you've written a song. You should make sure it's copyrighted, and you should make sure that you're affiliated with performing rights organizations to protect you.
Okay, so we are talking about literally writing the song on sheet music.
No. I mean, if you've recorded a song and it's not actually on a piece of sheet music, that's still considered a song that you've written. You may not just be classically trained and able to put something down in sheet music, but you've written a song. I think I think you could say there are many songs that have been incredibly successful that were written by writers that weren't classically trained and probably unable to even write on sheet music. So when I say write, I guess I don't mean literally write down on sheet music. I mean compose, create in any shape or form.
That sounds like Hendrix. He said he couldn't write. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's right.
Okay, I have a question. Now, my first question is, once you, for instance, I write lyrics. If I write lyrics, someone told me that the computer actually timestamped that to show that I wrote that. Is that true? Could that be like, you know, covering my music just by writing it on my computer?
What do you mean? You mean you covering it in terms of copywriting it?
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's two ways. I'm not aware of that, but I'm not a
Because I
lawyer.
used to send it to the copyright office. And pay
Well,
for it.
there's two ways that I've often been told that you can do it. Now that timestamp thing, I'm not familiar with it, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not saying it doesn't work.
Okay.
The way to do it to make sure is to as you said, register it with the copyright office. It'll cost you a couple bucks, but then you'll know it's properly copyrighted. The other way to do it that I've been told works, holds up in court, it's called the poor man's copyright. And you basically send your music to yourself in an envelope, and you seal the envelope and you mail it to yourself. And so to your point, you would write your lyrics out and in your title of your song, and you would, or if you had sheet music, you would put it in an envelope and you stamp it and put your own address on it and mail it back to yourself, and don't unseal it, put it into a file. And over the years, I've been told by lawyers that that is held up as being a legal form of copyright. But if you want to be real,
to be sure,
you go and you get it done. And I think most of it can be done online now.
Okay, now the second question is, I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. I wrote a couple of songs, I got them copyrighted, written. And then I received this postcard, a business postcard saying that I'm a part of a Spotify a settlement. I'm sorry, a class action suit. Because some form of fashion, it says here, Spotify made certain musical compositions with registered copyrights or applications for registration available for interactive streaming and or limited downloading without a license. Now, when I call up, I'm not really getting anywhere. And so I may call, at this point, I may call once every 6 months or once a year. And it takes me to something else, and I'm just holding on the phone. So I really haven't really pursued it, I guess. But do you know anything about this?
I mean, I guess I've heard a little bit about it. I think it's very similar to when, for example, you're a shareholder and you own a stock, and you get that letter in the mail that says that someone has sued, Apple because there was something irregular that was done with the stock price during a certain period of time. And if you sign on to that suit, then you will agree not to sue Apple, but you will get a small settlement as part of that. I suspect that that's what this is. Are they asking you to sign something and say, yes, I'll join the suit and take a small payment?
Yeah, well, I joined something, I think. I'm so sorry because I kind of just let it go.
I think that's what it is.
Settlement of the class action.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but I think that's what it is. They're basically reaching out to anybody that's had their music affiliated with Spotify and saying, hey, listen, Spotify, has violated the copyright law by not properly clearing some of the music that's and I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this, but when Spotify, there's a difference between, and from a licensing standpoint, when a company is just doing a stream and that's it, and you're not controlling the stream.
Okay.
That is one license, but then you need another license if it's an interactive stream, which means that you as the consumer can manipulate that stream. You can say, oh, I'm going to create my own playlist. stop the stream, start the stream. And so that requires additional licensing with some of the labels and publishing companies. And I suspect that Spotify did not do that in certain cases when they should have. And so they just did this general mail. I don't know whether you got it from a law firm, a general mailing to anybody that was affiliated, had their music affiliated with Spotify, and said, hey, we'll make you part of this suit. We'll give you a small piece of whatever we settle this, as long as you agree that you don't go after Spotify on your own. I mean, I'm 100.
Yes.
I know this for a fact, but I'm
think
guessing.
you're on the right road with this.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, because it is I would be entitled to a payment or other benefits or something like that. But I really, when I thought about it, I was like, hey, I'm not a known person in the music world,
Right.
and they could be talking about $5 or something.
Right.
And so.
Well, but $5, I guess, is $5.
Yeah, $5 is $5.
Yeah, I don't know what else you would get if you chose not to do it, right? I mean,
right.
But I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just guessing.
Yeah, I was just hoping you may have heard something over the years about it with Spotify, because it was pretty big in the news at one point.
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. Dan, can I ask a question? Speaking of $5 is $5. So it was interesting to hear you say about BMI Live and just reporting your own compositions. So I'm a BMI member, and I don't always report, get around to it, but when I do, I usually report my whole set list, even if only half of it or a third of it is my original songs. And I always figure, okay, well, maybe Miles Davis's estate is going to get another quarter of a cent off of that or something, right? But does it even matter?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I mean, look, if you submit your set list that includes some covers, I mean, that's not going to prohibit you from getting compensated for your originals. It probably won't result in Miles Davis getting a couple bucks, but I'm not worried about his estate. I think he's going to do okay otherwise. I mean, because let's be honest, I don't want to make everybody feel like that BMI Live is going to, allow them to quit their day job. I mean, BMI Live, if you use it enough, if you play out enough and you use it enough, you could make, in the thousands of dollars on an annual basis. You could make $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 in 1 year. If you only report once a month or twice a quarter, it's not going to be a lot of money. But you know what? Dimes turn into dollars, dollars turn into, $10, and suddenly it all adds up. So you got to remember to do it. And you can do it. You can do it retroactively for up to 6 months. So if you forget to do it, you have 6 months to report all of those performances. So I would put everything in a spreadsheet if you can, and just upload the same. I suspect most of the set lists are the same every night. If you just upload that one set list every time, then you probably are in pretty good shape.
So Dan, if I could just make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
My band is presently in the process of recording our first original as a band.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, we've been a cover band since our inception, but now we're looking at doing originals, and we'll be doing originals going forward. If I'm hearing you correctly, we should register with BMI, and then whenever we perform live, we need to, and we perform this song live, we need to register that with BMI by uploading the song and when we played it and where. And then the band or the songwriters can be compensated for that, is what you're saying?
Yes. Really briefly, I'll say it again, and hopefully in a straightforward way. You affiliate with BMI, okay, right. And you make sure you register all the songs that you've written as whoever, if it's a songwriting team, you and another guy or 3 people, and you make sure that you register all those songs so they're in our database. Okay. And the next step is when you go out and perform those songs in public for the first time, you make sure you report that set list to BMI, because then we'll see that, oh yeah, those songs are in their catalog, and we'll pay you based upon that. The other thing you need to do, and we talked about this earlier, that's not related to BMI, it's related to you as a band. Make sure you affiliate with Sound Exchange, because once you put this album out and it starts being streamed on Spotify or Pandora, or maybe even on Sirius XM, you are entitled to royalties for that. Now, again, I don't want to make everybody think they're going to get incredibly rich off of this. But if you do all these small things, then it adds up to, you know, gas money and, you know, stuff like that. I mean, buying new equipment for the band, those things aren't cheap. And I think just those small little increments of royalties can make a huge difference in keeping those expenses down as you continue to be a working band and a group of songwriters. So congratulations, Roy, on starting to produce original music. That's fantastic.
And we need to copyright that song.
Yes.
Register with Sound Exchange.
Yes.
And register with BMI. And
Correct.
then when we perform that song, register the song and the performance with BMI.
It's called BMI Live. BMI Live.
Okay.
I will, you know, Ian's got my contact information, and I would really, you know, encourage you, Ian, to share that with anybody that wants it. As I said, I'm a Baltimore guy here, so I always love to support the local scene and try and protect the rights on behalf of my neighbors here in Baltimore. I'm not, you know, I used to be, I was never here, but now I'm here all the time. So I feel even more of a commitment to protecting the rights of the songwriters and artists of the Baltimore area.
Can you share it one time right now?
So can I do what?
Can you share it one time right now?
My contact information?
Yes.
Yes, of course. It's pretty simple. D as in Dan, D Spears, SPEARS, D Spears at B as in boy, M as in Mary, I.com. D Spears.
And I was going to ask you to put that in the share drive. I mean, in the chat.
That's a good idea.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to type that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, but you know what? A couple of other things. We probably have about 10 minutes. How are we doing with your slide presentation? Are you?
We're done. That's why we're in the questions.
Listen, I got a question. I got a hand raised, and I have a question. Is Darius still online?
Yes.
Darius, you had a question.
Yeah. So I registered several of my compositions with BMI a while back in preparation for making some recordings with a group that I've been working with for a long time. And, you know, a lot of us had compositions. And I was surprised that I didn't have to upload sheet music, which is, you sort of answered that before. But in any case, you know, I'm not really, you know, I don't spend a whole lot of time with a lot of the bureaucratic stuff, but I did all that. But my suspicion is that perhaps there are some other things that I should have done in order to complete the process. Like these compositions are on recordings that have long since been released. You know, the band is still together. We, you know, other than the pandemic, we work a fair bit. And the band leader has invested a good deal in, you know, promotional efforts. You know, he's got a representative that gets his recordings on the radio a lot. And so what I'm kind of wondering about is, you know, is there any retroactive stuff that I need to be able to do? Like, should I be being compensated every time they spin one of my compositions on some radio station in Albuquerque? And why have I not seen that? And I suspect it's probably something I haven't done.
So just so I understand, those songs, you had those songs registered with BMI prior to the music receiving radio airplay.
Oh, absolutely, because we recorded them. Yeah.
Okay, so the way that BMI tracks radio performances, we use Shazam technology, which you know, we have listening stations in all the major market radio stations where, major markets like, you know, Baltimore, New York, LA, what have you, and we can track the performances through the digital footprints on the songs. Now, if it's a really small town that's primarily been airing your music, there's a chance that it won't be picked up by that listening station. In those smaller markets, we ask those markets to actually report their music. And sometimes, you know, we miss stuff. So I would say that's probably the biggest weakness of our tracking system, is that performances in small markets aren't sometimes picked up in the surveys and or the Shazam listening stations. So that's probably why you didn't get paid. But if your songs are receiving major market airplay, if they're going to be played in Baltimore or any other major city, there's no reason why you shouldn't be getting royalties on that.
Okay, well, that's why I'm wondering if there's something that perhaps I've overlooked in the whole process. I mean, it seemed like what I did when I, registered these compositions was correct.
Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you send me an email?
Yeah.
Tell me the songs that you think that you're surprised that you've not gotten any royalty payments on, that have received commercial airplay, and I'll see if I can make sure that they're properly registered and find out what the problem is.
So the other follow up to that question is, if I have a composition that is on an album and someone buys that album, like a CD, even though nobody buys CDs anymore, people buy these. Should I be getting a payment for any of those purchases through BMI, or is that something separate?
So I talked about that at the very beginning of the presentation, and it's not BMI related. It's called the mechanical royalty. And yes, you should be getting paid 9.1 cents per song on that album that was sold or digitally downloaded. And that money comes either through the Harry Fox agency, or it can come through the label, the artists themselves, because they're the ones that are responsible for the payments.
Right.
And it's a statutory rate. It's set at 9.1 cents. It's not something that BMI tracks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, you are entitled to royalties on that.
Gotcha.
It's probably not going to be a huge amount, but as I said earlier, 20 years ago, it probably would have been a pretty good chunk of money. But now, not many people are buying albums.
Yeah.
So Dan, I got one question from Valerie, if Valerie is still online, and then I think, we're gonna have to.
Okay.
Okay, Valerie is saying, I am a songwriter that will have one of my songs included in a live recording for the first time with other artists. My songs are copyrighted. Can you talk about recording for exposure versus recording for royalties? Now, did we already discuss that?
I don't know, but I mean, I don't know that they're, if I understand the question, I don't know that they are exclusive from one another. I think that they're all, I don't think you give up one by doing the other. In other words, if you record a song because you want to use it for exposure for you and your band or your songwriting abilities, versus, well, I'm going to record this because I want to see if I can generate some income. To me, they're all one and the same. I mean, hopefully they're both going to be working for you. You record a piece of music, hopefully it's going to help expose you as an artist and a songwriter, as well as maybe generate some royalties. And as long as you follow all the steps that we talked about before, is affiliate with BMI, make sure that, you're affiliated with Sound Exchange. Those are ways that you can generate income off of a live recording. Also, there are companies, there are sync right companies that represent songs that try and get your music synced, as we call it in the business, synced with television shows, movies, commercials. The synchronization right is something that these companies will represent on your behalf and try and get your songs traction that way. So yeah, once you record a song, yes, you're exposing yourself in terms of getting people to recognize who you are and what you're doing, but you're also opening up the door for the possibility of 2 or 3 different revenue streams, if things fall for you.
Mm-hmm. And you accept them all.
Yeah, explore it. Absolutely.
Well, you know what, Dan, Mr. Dan Spears, you're a wealth of information, man. We've run out of time, but goodness me, I am so happy that we were able to get you to come on, because there's so many people that really need to hear what you have to say. And hopefully your slide presentation will be someplace, we're recording, but hopefully your slide presentation will be someplace too where we can have access to it.
Well, any way you guys want to use it is fine. I will tell you this, and I'll wrap up with this. There's a lot here. I know it's a lot of legal stuff. I try and make it as simple as I possibly can. I'm not a lawyer, but not so much of all of this stuff is based upon the copyright law, so you can't not talk about legal stuff. But please know that I'm here in Baltimore and I'm available to help and support any way that I can. Ian and I met at an event a year or two ago, and I told him I would love to help support the Alliance in any way that I can. So I put my email address there, and I would welcome any and all of you to reach out with any questions, concerns, problems you might have, whether they're BMI related or not. Even if you say I'm an ASCAP songwriter and I have a question about my rights as a songwriter or a musician or an artist, I'm more than happy to help. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, we thank you, Dan. And everybody who's online, please become a member. Go to our website, sign up where you can get information like you just received. That's what we're in. We're in the information business. And our next segment, Dan, you mentioned a lot of times over and over and over about legalities. We're going to have some talk about business and legalities in our next segment. So hope to see you pop up on that screen if you don't have anything else to do.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Good
Thanks,
session.
Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
a
you all for
bunch.
joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
See y'all.
Okay, that was great, man.
Yes.
Fabulous. Fantastic information.
Well, like I said, please feel free to stay connected with me, and I'll do it all I can to help you guys any way that I can.
Appreciate it.
See you.
Thanks.